Hi guys, for 2.5 we're going to review factoring, so a little quick Algebra 1 review. So basically this is going to be really important when we're converting our circle equations from general form to standard form, which we're going to learn about more after fall break. But let's just go over some factoring questions together. I'm not going to do every question on here because I want you to try the next couple or the next one and look on the key on its learning to kind of check yourself to see if you really understand. So first, let's talk about standard form of a quadratic, ax squared plus bx plus c. A, b, and c are all coefficients or all numbers that are in front of the variables. C is a constant. It's a number that stands alone. So when it says to multiply the first term times the third term, what we're talking about is multiplying the a times the c. So if you don't see a number in front of the x squared, or the g squared in this case, we know that there is a 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply that value, 1 times 10, to find the product. And you're asking yourself, okay, so what multiplies to be 10? What multiplies to be 10? Okay, and then for the sum, we're looking at the middle term. The middle term is the one that's attached to the single variable. So what adds to be b? And what adds to be b? So in this case, b is 7. So what multiplies to be 10 and adds to be 7? So some people will write off 10 off to the side and say, okay, I'm thinking of all the factors, 1 and 10, 2 and 5, -2, -5. And then you'll notice that 2 plus 5 is 7. So those are my two numbers that multiply to be 10 and add to be 7. From here, because I'm dealing with a quadratic that has a is 1, so when the starting term is a 1 instead of another number, I can just go ahead and write my two terms as x plus 2, x plus 5. And I can FOIL those two out again to check my work. So try example 2 and example 3 on your own and make sure that you check your answers on its learning. So we're going to keep going though. We're going to keep going to find the product using the box method of number 2, part A. So when you see this x plus 3 squared, think about x squared. What does x squared mean? X squared is x times x, so it's something multiplied by itself. So if we're squaring the whole binomial x plus 3, that means I'm multiplying x plus 3 times x plus 3. And the box method that we're talking about is you have your, kind of like foursquare, and on top I'd put x and 3 and x and 3. Within the box, I'm multiplying. So x squared, 3x, 3x, and 9. And I can rewrite those terms that I just multiplied. The last step is combining your like terms. So that's x squared plus 6x plus 9. And you'll notice that most of the time, the diagonal from here will always be terms that are similar. So just keep an eye out for that. All right, so go ahead and try part B on your own. Again, checking your answers as you go. So now we're getting to kind of something called a perfect square trinomial. And what a perfect square trinomial is it's something that you have the first term is a perfect square. So anytime you have an x squared or a g squared, that's a perfect square. At the end, you're also going to have a perfect square. So perfect square means 7 times 7. So 49 is a perfect square. 6 times 6 is 36. 36 is a perfect square. So we're trying to figure out a relationship to get from B to C. When I don't know that it's a perfect square trinomial, I do something. I divide my B by 2, and I square it. So for example, if I take -14 and divide that by 2 and square it, I'll get -7 squared, which is the 49 that you see circled. So we can write a trinomial as the square of the binomial, which means, if I have x squared plus 8x plus 16, okay, what multiplies to be 16 and adds to be 8? So because a perfect square is at the beginning of the formula and at the end of it, that means I'm thinking, okay, here's x, and here's 4 and 4. So my factored version would be x plus 4, and since it's multiplying by itself, ultimately I can write it as x plus 4 squared. So we're going to be looking at more as trying to find that actual term. So here I'm giving you all these different equations, and I'm asking you to find the c value. So if I take my b term, which is -6, I divide it by 2, and I square it. So negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. Negative 3 squared is 9. That's my C value. Making it look nicer. Okay, so C is 9, and then factored form would be x plus, in this case it's going to be x minus 3. X minus 3. Because what multiplies to be 9 and adds to be negative 6, that's going to be negative 3 times negative 3. So just remember, a negative times a negative is always a positive. So go ahead and try the next two on your own. And now I'm going to walk you through completing the square. So I know this is kind of becoming a long video, but hopefully this is helping you refresh on those algebra skills. So when I complete the square, the first thing that I do is I isolate the terms with an x. So any number that you have, you're going to move over from the left side to the right side. So when you start all of these problems, I like to start with them set equal to 0. And then from there, move over your constant so that all your x's are left alone. So that means I would have x squared plus 8x equals 6. Now, I find that c term. What's that missing c term? And you'll notice here that I have 2 blank spaces. Because what you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. So if my b is 8, I'm going to divide my b by 2 and square it. That's going to give me 4 squared, which is equal to 16. And I'm going to add 16 on my left side, and I'm also going to add it on my left side. So ultimately, what multiplies to be 16 and adds to be 8, that's 4 and 4. So it's going to be x plus 4 squared equals, and then just go ahead and simplify that right-hand side. X plus 4 equals 22. One way that's a kind of trick to remember it, when you do this, you could kind of say, like, when you rewrite your binomial terms, you're going to have x squared plus 8x equals 16. You take the perfect square of the first term, the perfect square of the last term, and then the sign is the first sign that you see. So x plus 4. Perfect square of the first term, the sign of the second term, and the perfect square of the third term. But that's only a trick. So if you really were trying to conceptually understand this, you'd be finding that factored version, thinking about what multiplies to be the a times c, adds to be the b, and rewriting that middle term so that you're getting those two values. But since we're working specifically with perfect square trinomials, we can do this every time. Okay, I'm going to walk you through one more, but then I'm going to let you try those other ones on your own. So first thing we want to do is get x squared plus bx squared by itself. X squared plus bx, I don't know why I said squared. So that's going to be x squared minus 6x equals negative 10. You break up that b by dividing by 2 and squaring it. So negative 6 divided by 2 square. Anytime you do the b over 2 squared, it's going to give you a positive value because you're dividing the negative value by 2 and you're squaring it. And anytime you square a negative number, it's always going to become positive. So that gives me 9. So I'd have x squared minus 6x plus 9 equals negative 10 plus 9. And then from here, the square root of the first term, so that's going to be that x term. The sign of the second would be a minus, the square root of 9, 3 squared, equals negative 1. So hopefully this was just a quick refresher on what completing the square is. It's creating a perfect square trinomial so that you can write it as a binomial squared. And I want you guys to practice these ones. If you don't finish it in class, you're going to finish it for homework.